Hello and welcome to NewsClick. Today we are with Professor Arun Kumar, who has recently authored Ground Scorching Tax book. As we are going through the general election season right now, GST is the real issue of the country. All the political parties are ready with their own promises of redefining GST or reviving GST. But Arun Kumar, who is an expert on this topic since 1986, and he is one of the country's leading expert on black economy. Today he is with us. We'll understand what are the crucial issues with GST in our country right now. Let's start with the major criticism of GST in our country. According to the leading economists, everyone is saying that the GST which the BJP government has brought in July 2017, it has virtually disrupted the informal or unorganized sector in our country.
Right.
So, can you expand on this, sir? Is it true, or what is happening with the unorganized sector in our country?
So first thing to understand is that GST is a very complicated tax.
Yeah.
And it's being implemented in a very complicated country. Huh?
Yeah.
Why is our country very complicated? We have the large scale sector, medium scale sector, small scale sector and cottage sector,
Yeah.
And what applies to one sector doesn't apply to the other sector, So what is good for the large scale sector is not necessarily good for the small scale and the cottage sector. And that is what GST is showing. That this GST has come under the pressure of the large scale sector, the multinational corporations which have an all India presence, So it is to facilitate them that this tax has been levied. But the interest of the small scale and the cottage sector has not been taken into account in this. Okay. So even though they have been exempted from GST, so that if you are below 40 lakh of turnover, you don't have to register. If you are in the composition scheme up to 1.5 crore, you have a very simplified procedure and you have a very small tax of 1%, But this is where the problem lies. That if you are small, if you are in the cottage sector, then you are not going to get the input credit that the large scale sector will get. So your cost is a bit higher. Then when you sell to somebody, then you're not able to give input credit to them.
Yeah.
So therefore your price is higher.
Yeah.
And third is that if some large scale guy buys from the small scale guy, then they have to pay something called the reverse charge mechanism.
Yeah.
That means the tax that the small guy has not paid will have to be paid by the large sector. So the cost goes up again. So there are several reasons why the unorganized sector is being put at a disadvantage even though it is exempted from the GST. And the final thing that again is a problem for the small scale and the cottage sector is that it is supposed to be one nation, one tax. So, if you buy in Chennai and you sell in Srinagar, you buy in Ahmedabad and you sell in Guwahati, then one nation, one tax matters.
Okay.
So you have efficiencies associated with scale. But for the small guy, he buys in the local market and sells in the local market, and therefore there are no efficiencies. So while the small scale guy will not be affected by it, the large scale guy's cost will come down. And therefore in competition, they'll be able to sell their products cheaper. So these are several of these reasons why the small scale and the unorganized sector, they're being affected adversely, and the large scale guys are doing better, And that's why I will quote the pressure cooker industry's chairman.
Okay.
Pressure cooker industries has 5 organized sector units and 25 unorganized sector units. And the chairman of the pressure cooker industry is very happy. He made a statement last year about 5-6 months back that our growth is 24%. And the next sentence he said, that is because the unorganized sector, 25 units, they are not able to cope with GST, so demand has shifted to us. And this is the thing that is coming everywhere, So if you read the paper yesterday about the automobile sector also, in the automobile sector also, they are saying that the demand is shifting to the large scale sector, away from the small scale sector. So this way, you find that the unorganized sector is getting affected adversely, whereas the organized sector is benefiting. However, there's only one caveat. That caveat is that the GST has proved to be so complicated that within the last 2 years, there have been almost 500-600 orders and changes.
Yeah.
And that has led to huge complication. And even though many organized sector units are finding it difficult to cope with it. And I'm finding that the chartered accountants and the income tax lawyers who are supposed to know about it and who are supposed to help the industry, even they are confused. And even they are finding it difficult to cope with it, because every other day there's a change. And there are many court cases that are going on, and the courts are making various pronouncements. So therefore these complications that are there with our GST is a very complicated GST. So that is affecting even the organized sector, even though the organized sector is benefiting out of it.
While these policies were under discussion only, in the discussion stage, especially GST, you have already predicted and you have written articles, and in fact you have made a presentation in July 2015 in Rajya Sabha. Why do you think they did not understand your theory or the theory you proposed?
So, I had an article in Economic and Political Weekly and in the Hindu pointing to the fact that unorganized sector will be badly hit by this. They will not be able to cope with it because it's a very complicated tax. So therefore the Rajya Sabha committee, which was looking into GST, they invited me to give evidence. And I went with my papers and so on. But there were so many presenters, so they gave only 5 minutes. They said, you have to finish very quickly, you have to finish. Now, such a complicated thing you cannot explain in 5 minutes. So I made only 3-4 points, and then I submitted the papers. But I don't think they really looked at those papers. Then in July 2017, after the GST was implemented, then a group of 20 members of parliament called me, and I explained to them. Then they said, we did not understand all these difficulties that the unorganized sector will face. So what it suggests is that the various political parties that were there in the Rajya Sabha committee, none of them were very seriously interested in what impact it will have on the unorganized sector. They were only looking at it from the point of view of the organized sector, from the large scale sector. And therefore, my argument is that the unorganized sector goes unrepresented in our political process.
So we have seen recent assembly elections where BJP has continuously lost its power in Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. And in Gujarat also there was a rise in vote share of Congress, and GST was a crucial issue in those states. And so now BJP is coming out with some more sops, like for the real estate builders, or reducing the tax slabs for the last stage. So do you think this is the damage control of BJP there, or how do you see it? So,
the BJP has also understood that the unorganized sector is hurting. And therefore it has tried to offer SOPs. But these SOPs are not just to the unorganized sector, but also to the organized sector, like real estate, the organized sector and real estate, etc. But I think the more crucial issue really is that at this point, the GST has damaged the unorganized sector, and the unorganized sector employs 94% of the workforce. Okay. Now, if 94% of the workforce is affected, then unemployment will be there. Second is that it produces 45% of the output. If that is affected, then clearly the demand there will go down, and if the demand there goes down, then the demand for food will go down, and the farmers are affected adversely. So because of demonetization first, and then 8 months after that GST, the unorganized sector being hit, employment is a problem, and farming is a problem. Food prices, there's a deflation, okay, and that's why the prices of food have declined, where the costs are rising, so incomes of the farmers have got squeezed. So farmers everywhere are protesting, right? So government wants to help them, and that's why the government brought the schemes, like in the budget, they said that we'll give 6,000 rupees per family to 12 crore farmers. So they brought that scheme hoping to pacify the farmers. Now, in contrast, the Congress has come up with a Nyay scheme where 5 crore families will be given 72,000 rupees. So all the political parties are now realizing that there is a problem that the farming community is facing, that these people are facing, and they are trying to appease. But I think it's too late for any of that, because what has already happened is that the damage to the unorganized sector has been very large, and unless the unorganized sector is revived, that problem will continue. And we can see, for instance, that the demand for Manrega in the rural areas has shot up. Demonetization meant many small units closed down and the workers went back to the villages. Now that is also continuing to happen with GST. So therefore, Manrega demand went up from 38,000 crores to 47,000 crores. 47,000 crores to 55,000 crores and now to 66,000 crores. Huh? That means workers are not able to return. And even then, this 66,000 crore doesn't represent the full damage to the unorganized sector, because according to RBI, only 35 days of work is being given out of 100. If 100 days of work had been given, you can imagine the budget would have been more like 1,20,000 crores, not 66,000 crores. Right? So many of the workers from the unorganized sector, they've had to go back to rural areas without work, they're demanding work, etc. You know? The second factor that is also visible is that the investment rate in the economy has come down. You know? The investment rate had peaked in 2012-13 at 38%. It is down to 30-32%. Now that is also a sign of the fact that the demand is low and investment is low in the private sector. And if the investment is low, it causes unemployment in the economy. And that's why the NSSO data is showing that now the unemployment has reached a record high as compared to 45 years. You know? And CMIE is showing that 1.1 crore jobs are lost in 2018. You know? Others are showing that 4 crore jobs are.
Do you see ramifications of this GST policy in this
so
rise in joblessness?
GST policies are contributing to that, because the GST policies are meaning that the unorganized sector is losing out. And that's why my argument is that today the rate of growth of the economy is less than 1%. It's not 7%. 7% is the rate of growth of the organized sector. And the government is only collecting the data from the organized sector. The unorganized sector data is collected once in 5 years. You know, in between it is assumed that the organized and the unorganized sector are growing at the same rate. Okay. Now that was true before demonetization, but after demonetization the unorganized sector is coming down, organized sector was rising. So we cannot assume that the organized and the unorganized sector are growing at the same rate. So if we assume, as the data seem to be suggesting, because of loss of employment, because the All India Manufacturers Organization is showing a lot of units have not reopened, that even if this sector has come down by 10%, you know, and the organized sector is growing at the government rate of 7%, okay, then it means the rate of growth of the economy is less than 1%, you know. The government keeps saying, no, but look at the World Bank, look at the IMF, they are saying that our rate of growth is 7%. But IMF and the World Bank and ADB are not the primary data collecting points. They only take the government data and they use it. So that's why they will use the 7% rate of growth. They're not independent agencies collecting data independently. Okay.
So you would say that the current establishments are completely undermining the organizing sectors. So what do you
unorganized sector.
Oh, sorry, unorganized sectors.
Right.
So what do you see the vision of these governments then, UPA?
So the vision of all the governments in the last 30-40 years has been that they'll benefit the large scale sector. They don't care much about the unorganized sector, you know. They don't care much about agriculture. So our policies have been trickle down policies, you know, that let the large scale sector and the technology intensive sectors, let them grow, and then they'll be trickle down. Okay, this trickle down is not happening, you know, and especially because there's a lot of automation going on, so jobs are not being created, you know. And our GST is also a halfway house, because we have so many exemptions and so many concessions and so many.
How about the exemptions, sir? Mainly the crucial petrol, the petrol rates are
so
high. And
petrol is not exempt. Petrol is actually kept outside GST, okay, and liquor for human consumption is kept outside GST. So they're not exempt from indirect tax.
Is it beneficial for the government? Or?
Yes. So the reason is that the large percentage of our indirect tax is collected from petroleum goods and for liquor from human consumption. Now, state governments are very worried that with the levy of GST, maybe they will not collect as much tax as they were collecting earlier with the older system. So they wanted to keep these two outside the net of GST so that they could continue to collect more tax from here. And the center also wanted to collect more tax. So there was an agreement that center and states together that we'll keep these 4 items out. And
this
that's
was after July 2017.
No, this agreement was done before. Okay. And that's why in the act itself, it is mentioned that liquor for human consumption will not be taxed. Now, if you want to bring in liquor for human consumption under GST, you'll have to make a constitutional amendment. But on petroleum, you can bring it about because it is said that at some later date it will be implemented. Okay. But the point is you collect so much tax that therefore if you fit it into the GST framework, then you will collect much lower tax. then how will you make up for the tax collection? So that's why the central government and the state governments are not agreeing to bring the petroleum goods under GST, even though the industry is demanding it.
So in your book GST, you are proposing an alternative design
Yes.
or the current design. Can you briefly explain us?
So you see, what is the complication of GST? The complication of GST is that you are levying it at every stage, from raw material to the final product. So if you think of making utensil, so you first have raw material, iron ore, then you make pig iron, then you make steel, and out of steel you make utensil. And each thing has to be transported, and cost accountants are there, and all kinds of other chemicals and this, that. So by the time you buy a katori as a utensil, there are maybe 40, 50, 100 taxes on it. And each time the tax is paid, then input credit is given, then tax is paid, then input credit is given, then tax is paid, then input credit is given. So it's complicating the thing. So that's why you have something like 4 or 5 billion entries every month. Okay. My suggestion is that you are only collecting the tax at the final point. So why have all these 100 stages of collection of tax and giving input credit? Levy it only the final good. Okay. And anyway, the finance minister said that 5% of the units are paying 95% of the tax, and 95% are paying only 5% of the tax. Okay. So therefore, you need only collect tax from 5% of the units, the large scale sector. This way, the unorganized sector will be exempted, and therefore they will not face any problem the kind that they are facing today, because there is no input credit, there is no reverse charge mechanism. So neither do they lose from input credit, nor do they gain out of input credit. The big business doesn't gain out of input credit out of that. So all the points because of which the unorganized sector was losing out, they will all go away. Second is that you are making it very simple. So instead of having 4 billion entries every month, you'll have only about 40 million entries every month, and all from the large scale sector. And then every item that is produced by the large scale sector has a MRP, maximum retail price. So you levy the tax on MRP, okay, and collect it once. You don't have to collect it at every stage. So therefore, you don't have to collect from chartered accountant and from the bus travel and from this thing and that thing, So all services will be exempt except those which are consumptive services. So like say tourism will be this thing, or bus transportation. But it will not be on every item of service. Today every item of service has to pay the tax. Similarly, every item of consumption is to be paying the tax. Now you exempt all the basic items. So there will be no tax on steel, there will be no tax on pig iron, there will be no tax on the transportation of it, etc. So therefore this will greatly simplify it, and therefore the chances of the black income generation, that will go down, because the more complicated a tax is, the more the black income generation there is. Like under the present system, there's a lot of complication. If you buy sweet as prasad, it has no tax. But if you buy sweet as sweet in the sweet shop, then there's a tax on it. So I can always misclassify my sweet as prasad and sell it without paying the tax. If I have a hotel bill of more than 2,500 rupees, I have to pay a higher tax. If it's less than that, then I have to pay a lower tax. So I can misclassify. Now all this will go away. Yes. So therefore what I'm suggesting is a very simplified tax at the final point, okay, and it is only without any input credit, without any reverse charge mechanism, etc. So it will be greatly simplified.
So you are saying if it is not simplified, it will be a readjustment process all the time, right?
So if
error correction,
if you don't simplify it, then like at the moment it becomes very complicated. You are giving input credit and then giving price, then giving input credit and then giving the price, and then giving the input credit and then giving the price for every item. So there are hundreds of stages of taxation. So you reduce all that complication, and then the advantage would be that it will become a very simple tax, a last point tax. Okay. So the same advantage that today you have of it being a last point tax, that will be maintained, and it will be ad valorem. So ad valorem tax at the last stage is the same as VAT in the entire system. So therefore you will not lose taxes.
Like the current government is saying that cooperative federalism is being strengthening and
yes.
all. Is it the case?
So what has happened is that all the state governments were involved in finalizing this tax. Okay.
31
so,
GST councils.
Yes.
Also
so in the GST council, all the states are represented. So that's why the government keeps saying there's cooperative federalism. However, What does federalism mean? It means India is a very diverse country. So the requirement of Maharashtra is not the same thing as requirement of Assam. Requirement of Tamil Nadu is not the same thing as requirement of Himachal. So we cannot treat all the states the same. And that's why autonomy was given to each state to levy taxes on its own way and to collect resources and spend them on their own way. Now under GST, everybody has to come under and charge the same tax. Okay. So therefore, in a sense, it is weakening the fiscal federalism and the autonomy of the states to fix the tax as per their requirement. Okay. Second is local bodies which provide all the services to the citizen, like education, like employment generation, like health, like sewage. They have been kept out of it. They used to have octroi and so on as a major source of tax. That is gone. So therefore, that's a third tier of government which is completely kept out of it. So therefore, that also is denting the fiscal autonomy. But the most important point is that it is said that it's a last point tax. And therefore, the poorer states will get more tax collection than the manufacturing states. And that's why initially Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, which were the manufacturing states, they were opposed to it. And then the central government offered that if you lose the tax revenue, then we will compensate you for the tax revenue. Okay? But what is happening is, because the unorganized sector is getting damaged, and the unorganized sector is concentrated in the poorer states, therefore poorer states are losing out even though they collect more revenue, because they lose production. Okay? So therefore, even though it's supposed to be a last point tax of benefit to the poorer states, actually they are losing out.
So finally, one last question, sir. So do you think the coming government can revive the unorganized sector the way it is being damaged now? How long would it take to revive or to strengthen to understand, to at least realize that there is an unorganized sector in our country?
So I think everybody is now recognizing, and that's why everybody, including the present government, they had a scheme for pension for the unorganized sector. They keep saying that we have mudra loans for the unorganized sector. Everybody is recognizing that the unorganized sector is hurting, and that's why unemployment is increasing. Okay, and that's why Congress government also wants to give to the unorganized sector. But the real crux of the matter is we have to revive the unorganized sector units. The units that have closed down, the demand that is low there. So we have to pump in purchasing power in that lower segment. Okay? And we have to pump in investment, and we have to pump in research and development in those areas so that the small scale sector can continue to function properly. And as I said, if we reform GST as I suggested, then all the disadvantages that the unorganized sector has at the present, they will all disappear in the new scheme, and that will help them revive on their own.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for
Thank
your
you.
insights.
Thank you.
That's all for today. Keep watching NewsClick for real issues.